And I would like to also share a personal experience or a personal story. I met a gentleman recently, and he works for a company. They had a voice actor on staff. She was a full-time employee, and she was a professional, and apparently she had a very high level of skill. So the boss of this company went and found themselves a $100 voice emulator software, and they fired her just like that. They're like, yeah, this is obviously $100 versus a salary. And this is the type of mentality that is going to be adopted in many, many businesses. And this is going to lead to a never before seen displacement of workers. Now, what do these people do? Let's just say that this girl, she's 30 years old. Does she then have to go learn to be an AI programmer? What fields will be untouched? Anything that uses a computer is going to be fucked. Let's just call it what it is. So you have to either enter into the service industry, either you become and even this may not be relevant, like a teacher of some sort. Like, I used to do a lot of work at a skateboard academy. Well, we used to teach skateboarding. I was the manager over there, and from time to time I would do some instruction, but I was the manager over there, and I don't really see AI being able to teach your kid how to skate in a real actionable way. You can understand the intellectual aspects of it, like put your foot here, push this way, but it's a lot different than having somebody who can not only really show you and demonstrate and kind of make the little tweaks that are necessary, but also kind of catch your ass when you're about to completely eat it. AI isn't going to prevent you from face planting. So these types of industries are going to have some staying power. But if you work with a computer, you're looking at displacement before too long. And that is just kind of the reality that we live in. And I'm not really sure where those people go. I think we're going to be looking at a situation where universal basic income, or perhaps maybe a better term for it might be guaranteed income, because the perils of universal basic income is that the people who control the flow can at any point turn the spigot off, and they wind up with a population that's completely dependent on them, and that opens up an entirely different Pandora's box. So let's call it guaranteed basic income. That without this guaranteed basic income, I mean, what does the world look like?
This is a rat burger.
I mean, do we just have a small amount of the population that's working and everybody else is just clawing and scratching? I mean, I've had some people say, well, for every job that AI displaces, 10 more will be created. And when I asked them, I said, well, can you tell me more about that? Because in my imagination, and I have a decent imagination, I can imagine all kinds of shit, I don't see what those jobs are. Now, no, nobody can predict the future. So just because I can't predict what those future jobs that AI might create are doesn't mean that that's incorrect. But this person was completely incapable of telling me what those jobs might be. He's just basing this on historical precedent, like, electrification, right? We didn't need candle lighters anymore. We had an electrical grid, and that requires maintenance. But AI intrinsically doesn't really and won't really require people to kind of maintain it, because at a certain point it will be able to maintain itself. The amount of people required to keep these systems running, right, isn't going to be a lot. Now, there is a physical mechanism behind AI, right? We're talking about physical computers that do computing power. We're talking about physical server places that have air conditioning systems that will need to be maintained, right? There are physical processes in these physical buildings that house these systems that may require some form of maintenance. So that's some jobs right there. But for the most part, I'm not exactly sure what these positions will be. And I think it's a bigger question that I don't think anybody necessarily knows the answer to. But a lot of people who spearhead these systems, like Sam Altman, who is the head of OpenAI or the CEO of OpenAI, he has gone on record a few times talking about universal basic income. And if anybody has watched the Proco video where he had that young gentleman on who spoke very, very fast, he basically pretty much his favorite word was utopia.
Utopia.
And it's a great word. Who doesn't want to live in a utopia? And we might get there. But before we get to utopia, there's obviously going to be a major disruption or a sort of shifting. And that will be a time of great chaos before we get to a utopia where AGI, right, artificial general intelligence, which is very, 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 very different from what we currently have. What we currently have is machine learning, or we have complex learning algorithms. And learning is a very broad word, but these things only learn in the context of what's fed into them. So I think algorithms is far more appropriate. It's really important to understand that distinction. When you tell people AI art, they go, oh, AI, it's artificial intelligence. It's like that thing from the movies, but we're not there yet. And then that's a separate conversation about what really happens when we achieve artificial general intelligence. I mean, you can very easily make an argument that once you attain this truly thinking entity, it might make decisions that are not in the best interest of humanity. Anybody with a reasonable capacity for basic critical thinking would imagine that if you have sentient artificial intelligence and it can truly think for itself, if you tell it that we need to save the planet, it's going to pretty quickly come to the conclusion that, well, the main problem that the planet has is humans. Or as George Carlin, my hero, and many of us hero, said that when we say save the planet, it's incredibly disingenuous, because save the planet really means more save ourselves, right? Because once human beings are gone, the planet Earth will continue to float through space, this beautiful blue ball. Human beings might be gone, plastic will remain, and we will have Earth plus plastic. And in time, it's a self-healing mechanism or organism, and in time, it will heal itself and it will move on to a different sort of model with different life forms over time, and eventually the sun will eat the Earth, and that will be kind of the end of it. In about 3 billion years, when the sun expands due to its basic processes, it will get too hot. It will expand too close to the Earth, and Earth will become a smoking husk of just incendiary rock. And obviously, I mean, look, we're probably not going to make it that long. If AI doesn't take us out, I'm sure humans will find our own way to take us out, regardless of all the rumblings of fusion. And I want to have a little faith that we're smart enough to solve some of these problems before it gets to be too late. But smart enough is not the same thing as have the correct priorities. But in about 3 billion years, when the Earth is just a incendiary scorched ball, no longer blue, it is brown and red, other planets will experience a shift, right? So if we look at Europa, excuse me, one of the celestial bodies that orbits, I think it's one of the moons of Jupiter, which, as we all know, we've all seen Europa Report, which is actually really well done science fiction movie. You know, Europa has a very thick layer of ice around basically it's a moon full of water. And when the sun expands, Europa's ice will melt and the water will be there, and it will get all kinds of sun, and all sorts of processes will happen, because after the sun expands, it doesn't continue to expand. It's going to reach a certain point, and there it will stay for a few billion years before I think it just kind of burns out and becomes this little blue nugget type of thing, and then that's a wrap. But these different bodies, or planetary bodies, will have their own cycle of potentially being in the Goldilocks zone, and then life, if it hasn't already, will evolve to a greater potential capacity on Europa. Right? So it's really interesting to think about, and it's a little horrifying, because you got to think, no matter what we do, unless humanity leaves Earth, there's a time limit on this fun little experiment where space dust gained the capacity to think and become aware of itself. But before we get to that, before the sun eats the Earth and our solar system drastically changes, we're going to go through this time of upheaval brought on by AI. And I think a lot of people thought that this was going to come a lot later than it actually is. So it's happening today. Already we see this person here has been put out of a job. I just told you a story about the voice actor. Let's see, do I have it here? Yeah, Valley is basically, you can train this model on any voice recording you have. It doesn't say how much sample size you need. I would imagine it would probably just be a few minutes worth of speech. And this model can completely duplicate not only the sound and frequency of their voice, but the intonations, the pauses, the emotions of these things. I mean, let's go down here a little bit. It talks about emotion. So anger, sleepy, neutral, amused, disgusted. We're very quickly getting into this kind of world of, well, can we trust any media? Is anything that we're seeing going to be real? Deepfakes are a thing. I think we're all aware this is something that's really moved to the forefront of people's consciousness. We understand that this is now really easy to do, where deepfakes was a thing that we don't have to worry about that too much, because it probably is super difficult to do. Now it's actually super easy. There's plenty of programs that you can just put on your PC, and you can just deepfake your way into oblivion. Good times, everybody. And how long before some sort of serious political upheaval, or perhaps somebody uses this to completely misinform a population to get their way? And these things are definitely going to happen. So legislation, policy, and laws really do have quite a bit to catch up to. So I'm going to play just a little bit of these Valley things. I don't have it set up right now so that the desktop will be heard in the correct way. I'm just going to have to make it super loud. It's going to probably sound like shit. So let's do anger.
We have to reduce the number of plastic bags.
Yeah, this guy's super angry. Plastic bags. Terrible. This sleepy.
We have to reduce the number of plastic bags.
Oh, there's a plastic bag. Yeah. Let's go with disgusted.
We have to reduce the number of plastic bags.
Yeah. What about amused?
We have to reduce the number of plastic bags.
Yeah, so what you have here is basically all sorts of control over speech. And then at that point, I believe you can just type in what you want. So text to speech, once it's been trained. And if you take a step back, you're like, that's super neat, actually. Isn't that interesting that computers and algorithms have got to the point where they can do this? But the real question is, should we do this? Should these tools be released out into the world? Well, these are all stepping stones on their way to creating AGI, or Utopia.
Utopia until forever.
Right? And what does that utopia look like? I just don't know. In order to get to a utopia, it kind of requires a certain amount of goodwill or good intention from the people who control these models. And living in a hyper capitalist society, essentially where we're at is late stage capitalism, where workers' rights have been diminished. Corporations' rights to do whatever the hell they want have been, consistently unshackled over time. It's really been a death by a thousand cuts. I don't see the motivation for anybody to act in the best interest of humanity over their own self-interest. Again, it's a condition of living in a competition-based society. And these are some major issues that humanity is going to have to struggle with. Now, this isn't me saying that there's no way that these capabilities can be used in a way that is positive. Anything is potentially a double-edged sword, but I see a lot of people saying, well, the AI revolution is here, and here's how you get rich from it. And they say you have to incorporate these tools to make yourself more productive. So now you can do the grunt part of your work in 3 hours, leaving you 7 hours to either fine-tune what you had AI do and just increasing your productivity. But that's not really how it's going to work. I don't think that's realistic. I think people who are employers are going to see these tools as a very simple way to increase profit margins, right? Their main obligation isn't to their employees, it's to their stockholders. We have been fed, or not we, many people who invest are deluded into some sort of belief that we living in a system where perpetual increase or perpetual gain is somehow normal. You know that that's just not how the universe works. It's just not how things work. And the only way that we can, or they can achieve a sort of perpetual increase in value is that something else has to give, and that's going to be their employees. And eventually more and more employees will be displaced by AI. And the question is, where do they go? What new industries will pop up? And if anybody is actually listening to this sort of random diatribe, I would love to know where you think those new jobs and industries will be specifically, because I legit want to know. I mean, again, I don't have a crystal ball. I am not a machine learning specialist. So there might be aspects of these technology that will require human maintenance, human intervention that I am simply not aware of because I have not built these black box systems. So these are interesting questions. And universal basic income or guaranteed basic income is, at some point, if things keep going the way that I very, very much imagine they will be going at an exponential rate. We're just seeing the beginning of this displacement now. It's something that's going to happen, or you're going to have a very restless population. Now, I have seen some things where I think he's either the CEO or one of the heads of Google actually advocate for universal basic income. But when asked about why he thinks this will need to happen, his reasoning was actually quite shocking. What he said was, I hate looking at a white screen. Let me find something dark. Hi, ChatGPT. How you doing today? What he said was actually something very dark. And he didn't say it was because, well, this is just the natural evolution of displacement of AI. He says, without universal or guaranteed basic income, people will not stand for this anymore. And when he says that, he means to talk about predatory business practices, the consolidation of power and wealth into the hands of few. They will rise up. And if we want to be able to continue on the path that we've been going on, essentially, we will need to placate the populace with one of these things. So when I read that, I was like, oh my God, that is fucking diabolical. If your main purpose or your main desired outcome is to continue with this system that allows for this sort of wealth and power aggregation into smaller and smaller areas, then yeah, this makes sense for you. You can make an argument that the shift from an agrarian or agricultural society to an industrial society was similar in its scope. And what I would say is, I think that there is some validity to that. I mean, the world completely changed, but in the beginning, when industrialism took over, look at the conditions that people worked in those factories. There was no 5-day work week. There was no 8-hour work day. People were working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week in conditions that were extremely dangerous in that were pretty much designed to burn people out to maximize profits. And then over time, legislation caught up, right? Laws changed. People fought and advocated for these systems to be put in place that actually benefit humans. And I think we're going to see legislation, systems get put into place over time. Generally, if I had to put myself in a category, I prefer things that are humanitarian. I don't put freedom at the expense of others as a priority. While I do advocate for freedom, I like policies that benefit everybody. I like to advocate for basic human decency. That's kind of my baseline. But if you put me in a room with someone who is extremely right wing and is like, parroting a bunch of whatever those talking points are, I guarantee you, as soon as we put those divisive arguments on the shelf and we start connecting on the things that make us the same, we'll see that really a lot of that stuff doesn't matter so much. And the only people who benefit from us fighting each other are the people who currently have power. I mean, it is all by design. But at the end of the day, there's far more things that make us the same than actually divide us, right? We all love our dogs. That's just a fact. We really love our dogs or our cats or our pets. We care about our children. I don't have any. But if I did, I would want them to have the best future possible. And the areas where we differ are these kind of buzzword talking points that are kind of force-fed to us. And that, again, is all by design. But I would love to see people out there more just connecting on the things that make us the same, which there is just far more of. Do I sound like an idiot for saying all this shit? Because at the end of the day, life is short, my friends. You really only have one obligation to yourself, and that's to try to be happy in the short time that you have. And I would take that a step further, and that is to try to do what you can to make other people happy and have a ripple effect. It's not about going down in the history books. It's not about leaving a legacy, unless, of course, I think that that legacy is a positive legacy and you manage to find a way to use your resources to make the world a better place or leave it better than you found it. But your only real obligation is to live a happy life, to experience joy, and to do that in a way that is not at the detriment of others. I know that's easier said than done. Life can be absolutely brutal and can just kick the living shit out of you. And I get that. Sometimes it's hard. It really can be. But, this type of stuff, this AI art, this massive displacement that is looming over us, it's going to make it very difficult. How do you find joy when you're so stressed out about paying your bills, about taking care of your kids, about, not becoming homeless, which is a very real threat or very real thing that people are afraid of when they can't earn a living. So I guess what I'm saying is try to find the joy I know it's just so much easier said than done. I completely get that, my friends. But do what you can. You owe it to yourself because, you're going to blink and you're going to be old as shit. I swear it was just yesterday that I was just skating around the front of my house, like with a skateboard with no nose that was 15 inches wide and weighed 1,000 pounds, going kickflip. What the hell's a kickflip? Well, let's spend the next 8 hours failing at that. And those are simple times. And now I blink and here I am. I'm old as shit. My life has been completely taken over by this current threat that artists are facing to their livelihoods. And it's very easy to just go, you know what, I kind of let this get away from me. So do what you can to squeeze the joy. And especially to all my good friends in the Discord and that small community that we've built up who really feel the dread. I want you guys to be happy. I've really come to care about each and every one of you. I see your humanity. I see what you're going through because we're all going through the same thing. And I want you to do what you can to find some joy, whether that's, spend some time with your dog, go outside and stare at some grass. Shit. I mean, think of some naughty stuff in your mind and act on those images. If that gives you some joy, just paint the walls, whatever it is that you're going to do. Find some joy. All of your problems, they're going to be here when you come back and you can do with them as you wish. Don't forget to be creative. Don't let this steal your fire. Don't let it make you stop pursuing the lifelong journey that is art. You don't complete art. This is a process and an undertaking that is never completed. The best artists in the world are continually evolving their style and learning new things and developing what they do. And that process is about as worthwhile as a process that anyone, anywhere can engage in. Just say no to crack, kids. Talk to you soon.